Oh, really? Does this sound familiar? Daddy, I need $300.
Words calling a black woman difficult in Hollywood is the kiss of death. It's the kiss of death, and it's hard enough being a dark-skinned black woman in this business. But I felt it was necessary for us to finally move forward.
And I went back to them in 2009 and I said, please, I need you to clear my name.
You talked to him directly?
I spoke to JL when my dad died and my brother died, and I begged them. I said, I have a family. I need you to tell the world that this stuff didn't happen.
Remember Janet Hubert? She was Hollywood's next big star. Then she met Will Smith. What followed was character assassination, career destruction, and 27 years of warfare.
Janet Hubert was never difficult on that set. Janet Hubert was so professional, it wasn't even funny. I think Will simply needed to win, and I think sometimes when you get caught up in a lie, and those things never happened.
The abusive marriage they hid from the cast, the contract designed to humiliate her, the systematic blacklisting that followed her refusal to accept disrespect.
Words, words can kill. But I lost everything. Reputation, everything.
This is how Hollywood destroys women who won't stay in line. Janet Louise Hubert arrived in Hollywood with everything the entertainment industry claimed to want. Classically trained at Juilliard, seasoned on Broadway, with the kind of dramatic range that could anchor any production. She wasn't another struggling actress hoping for her big break. She was a proven professional, ready for stardom. The audition for The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air should have been routine. NBC was looking for someone to play Vivian Banks, the sophisticated matriarch of an affluent black family. Hubert's resume spoke for itself. She had starred in the original Broadway cast of Cats, performed in numerous off-Broadway productions, and possessed the classical training that gave her character an authentic gravitas. When she landed the role in 1990, everything seemed perfect. The show was groundbreaking, a family sitcom centered on black excellence rather than black struggle. Uncle Phil wasn't a stereotype, but a successful federal judge. Aunt Viv wasn't a caricature, but an educated, articulate woman with her own ambitions and complexity. Hubert brought something special to Vivian Banks that the character desperately needed. She wasn't playing the typical TV mom who existed solely to support other characters' storylines. Her Aunt Viv was fierce, intellectual, and uncompromising. She could deliver comedy with perfect timing, then shift into dramatic territory that elevated the entire production.
That does it. I'm getting me a white man.
The show's success was immediate and massive. Will Smith's charisma combined with the talented ensemble cast created something television hadn't seen before. A black family sitcom that dealt with real issues while still being genuinely funny. The ratings were phenomenal. The cultural impact was undeniable. But behind the scenes, tensions were already building that would eventually explode into one of television's most destructive feuds. The problem started with something deceptively simple: creative control. Hubert wasn't content to just deliver her lines and collect her paycheck. She had opinions about her character's development. She questioned storylines that didn't ring true. She pushed for Vivian Banks to have more depth, more agency, more authentic black female experience. Smith was dealing with his own pressures. The IRS had seized his assets before the show began.
I didn't send the IRS their money, okay? I didn't necessarily forget, but I didn't send them their money, and they wanted it. They wanted it.
Right. They like it.
So they came to get their money.
He was essentially broke and desperate when Quincy Jones offered him this opportunity. The success of Fresh Prince wasn't just career advancement for him, it was financial survival. This desperation may have contributed to what happened next. As the show's star and executive producer, Smith had unprecedented power for someone so young and inexperienced. But instead of using that power to elevate everyone around him, he began to see challenges to his authority as threats to his survival. Hubert's professionalism and artistic integrity The very qualities that made her performance so compelling were about to become the weapons used to destroy her career. The seeds of destruction had been planted. All they needed was the right conditions to grow into something that would consume them both. By the second season of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the show had become a cultural phenomenon. But success brought new pressures and revealed fundamental conflicts about who controlled the show's creative direction. At the center of this brewing storm was a battle between two very different personalities with very different approaches to their craft. Janet Hubert had spent years mastering her profession. Her Juilliard training taught her to dig deep into character motivation, to find truth in every scene, to never settle for surface-level performance. She approached Aunt Viv as a complete human being with complex emotions, personal struggles, and authentic reactions to the situations around her. Will Smith, meanwhile, was learning on the job. He had natural charisma and comedic timing, but he was still developing as an actor. More importantly, he was learning how to navigate the power dynamics of television production. As both star and executive producer, he held influence that most actors never experience. The conflict started small. Hubert would question character choices that seemed inconsistent or unrealistic. She'd suggest alternative approaches to scenes that felt emotionally hollow. She'd push for storylines that gave Vivian Banks more agency and complexity. These weren't diva demands. They were the professional observations of a trained actress trying to maintain artistic integrity. But in the hierarchical world of television production, Smith began interpreting Hubert's professionalism as insubordination. Her suggestions felt like challenges to his authority. Her artistic standards seemed like personal attacks on his vision for the show. Other cast members noticed the growing tension, but weren't sure how to navigate it. Joseph Marcel, who played Jeffrey the butler, would later describe Hubert as someone who embraced him and protected him on set.
I've never said anything untoward or against Janet. She was always the lady that embraced me. She and James Avery were the two people that, because we were about the...
James Avery, the respected veteran actor who played Uncle Phil, seemed to understand Hubert's perspective as a classically trained performer. But Smith held the power. As the show's title character and executive producer, his comfort level determined the working environment for everyone else. When he felt threatened by Hubert's artistic standards and professional demands, the entire production dynamic shifted. The situation was further complicated by what was happening in Hubert's personal life. She was pregnant during the third season, dealing with what she would later describe as an abusive marriage, and struggling to balance her professional responsibilities with increasingly difficult personal circumstances. None of her co-workers knew the extent of her personal struggles. They only saw someone who seemed increasingly on edge, more demanding, less willing to go along with decisions that felt artistically compromising. What they interpreted as difficult behavior was actually someone fighting battles on multiple fronts while trying to maintain professional standards. The breaking point came during contract negotiations for the fourth season. NBC offered Hubert what she described as a terrible deal: significantly reduced screen time, lower pay, and restrictions on her ability to work elsewhere. The offer felt deliberately insulting, designed to force her departure rather than negotiate in good faith. Hubert rejected the offer, expecting the standard back and forth of Hollywood negotiations. She had been a crucial part of the show's success. Her performances had earned critical acclaim. Surely the network would return with a reasonable counteroffer. Instead, NBC announced they were recasting the role of Vivian Banks. The message was clear. No individual actor, regardless of talent or contribution, was more important than the machine. Hubert could accept their terms or be replaced. The decision to recast rather than negotiate revealed something disturbing about the power dynamics at play. This wasn't just about money or scheduling conflicts. It was about establishing who controlled the show and what happened to those who challenged that control. What Janet Hubert didn't realize was that her professional demise was just beginning. The real destruction would come not from being replaced, but from how the industry would frame her departure to ensure she'd never have another opportunity to demand respect. When Janet Hubert was replaced by Daphne Maxwell Reid for the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air's 4th season, the transition could have been handled quietly and professionally. Television shows recast roles regularly, usually with minimal fanfare and diplomatic explanations about creative differences or scheduling conflicts. Instead, what followed was a systematic character assassination campaign designed to destroy Hubert's reputation and ensure she'd never have the power to challenge the entertainment industry again. Will Smith fired the first shot in what would become a 27-year war. Rather than simply moving forward with the new cast, he chose to publicly attack his former co-star's character and professionalism. In interviews, he painted Hubert as jealous, difficult, and impossible to work with. These statements weren't just defensive responses to criticism. They were calculated attacks designed to preemptively discredit anything Hubert might say about her experience. By framing her as bitter and jealous, Smith was creating a narrative that would follow her for decades. Alfonso Ribeiro, who played Carlton Banks, joined the attack with even more vicious language. In college appearances and stand-up sets, he described Hubert as mentally unstable and unprofessional, using terms that were both sexist and potentially defamatory. The campaign worked exactly as intended. In Hollywood, being labeled difficult is career suicide, especially for Black women who already face additional barriers to employment. The industry operates on relationships, recommendations, and reputation. Once someone is marked as troublesome, opportunities disappear.
And I went back to them in 2009 and I said, please, I need you to clear my name.
You talked to him directly?
I spoke to JL when my dad died and my brother died, and I begged them. I said, I have a family. I need you to tell the world that this stuff didn't happen.
The personal cost for Hubert was devastating. She found herself blacklisted from television and film opportunities. Casting directors would recognize her name and pass without consideration. The woman who had been poised for stardom was effectively erased from the industry. But the professional destruction was just the beginning. The attacks on her character created personal isolation as well. Family members who had been proud of her success began questioning whether she had somehow brought this on herself. Friends in the industry distanced themselves to avoid guilt by association. The psychological impact was severe. Hubert later revealed that she experienced suicidal thoughts during this period, feeling so broken and isolated that she considered ending her life. The woman who had once commanded Broadway stages and television sets was reduced to questioning her own worth and sanity. The most insidious aspect of this character assassination was how it became accepted truth within the entertainment industry. People who had never worked with Hubert, never witnessed her behavior on set, began repeating the narrative that she was difficult and unprofessional. This created a self-reinforcing cycle where her exclusion from opportunities became evidence of her supposed problems. If she was talented and professional, the logic went, why wasn't she working? The fact that she had been systematically blacklisted became proof that the blacklisting was justified. The campaign against Janet Hubert wasn't just about one actress or one television show. It was a demonstration of what happens to anyone who challenges the established power structure in Hollywood. Her destruction served as a warning to other performers. Accept what you're given, stay in your assigned role, or face complete professional annihilation. The message was received. For years afterward, the entertainment industry pointed to Janet Hubert as an example of what not to do, how not to behave, what happens when you think you're bigger than the machine. But they had underestimated her resilience. Janet Hubert wasn't going to disappear quietly. She was going to fight back, even if it took decades to reclaim her narrative and her dignity. The years following Janet Hubert's departure from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air transformed from professional disappointment into personal warfare. What began as industry politics evolved into a bitter, public feud that would consume both parties for nearly 3 decades. Hubert refused to accept the narrative that had been constructed around her departure. While Will Smith and Alfonso Ribeiro moved forward with their careers, she remained trapped by the character assassination that had followed her exit. Every attempt to find new work was undermined by whispers about her supposed difficulty and unprofessionalism. The rise of the internet and social media gave Hubert new platforms to tell her side of the story, but it also provided more opportunities for the feud to escalate. Every interview, every social media post, every public appearance became another battlefield in their ongoing war. In 2011, the conflict exploded into public view when Hubert gave a scathing interview to TMZ, declaring that she would never participate in any Fresh Prince reunion as long as Smith was involved. Her language was harsh and unforgiving, calling Smith an egomaniac and an asshole who hadn't grown up since his early 20s. Ribeiro's college stand-up routine, where he described Hubert in degrading terms, surfaced online and reignited the controversy. His comments revealed the depth of animosity that still existed among the cast members, but they also demonstrated how the original narrative had become accepted fact among those who worked on the show. The 2016 Oscars controversy provided another flashpoint when Hubert released a Facebook video criticizing Jada Pinkett Smith's call to boycott the ceremony. What started as commentary on awards, show politics quickly morphed into a direct attack on Will Smith's privilege and hypocrisy. These public outbursts were often dismissed as the rantings of a bitter former star, but they revealed something deeper about the psychological toll of systematic exclusion. Hubert wasn't just fighting for her reputation. She was fighting for her sanity, her dignity, and her right to exist in an industry that had tried to erase her. The personal cost of this extended warfare was enormous for both parties. Smith, despite his massive success, remained haunted by the unresolved conflict. Hubert, meanwhile, found herself defined more by her feuds than by her considerable talents and achievements.
And I'm sorry that I have blasted you to pieces.
No, it is first of all, thank you for sharing that with me. I didn't know.
The entertainment industry watched this battle with a mixture of fascination and discomfort. It served their purposes to have Hubert marginalized, but the ongoing nature of the conflict kept raising uncomfortable questions about power dynamics, racial politics, and the treatment of women in Hollywood. Behind the public attacks and counterattacks, both Smith and Hubert were dealing with the human cost of their prolonged animosity. The hurt and anger that had started as professional disagreements had metastasized into personal hatred that affected their families, their mental health, and their ability to move forward. Other cast members found themselves caught in the crossfire, forced to choose sides or remain diplomatically neutral while watching their former TV family tear itself apart. The show that had once represented Black excellence and family values had become a cautionary tale about ego, power, and the destruction that follows when reconciliation becomes impossible. By 2020, both parties had spent more time fighting each other than they had spent working together on the show that had made them famous. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air had been off the air for 24 years, but the wounds from its production remained as fresh and painful as ever. What nobody anticipated was that it would take a global pandemic and a forced period of reflection to finally create the conditions for healing. The question wasn't whether they could end their war. It was whether either of them was strong enough to survive the peace. The call came in 2020, 30 years after The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air first aired and 27 years after Janet Hubert had last spoken to Will Smith. HBO Max was planning a reunion special to celebrate the show's anniversary, and they wanted everyone involved, including the original Aunt Viv. For Hubert, the invitation represented both an opportunity and a risk. She had spent decades fighting to reclaim her narrative, but participating in the reunion meant confronting the person who had, in her mind, destroyed her career and reputation. For Smith, now a global superstar worth hundreds of millions of dollars, the reunion represented a chance to address the one failure that still haunted him. Despite achieving everything Hollywood had to offer, he had never resolved the damage done during those early years of success.
Know that when I look back now, it's obvious that you were having a hard time, and I felt like you hated me. I could not do a 30-year celebration of this show and not celebrate.
The face-to-face meeting between Smith and Hubert was filmed separately from the main reunion, allowing them to speak privately for the first time since the 1990s. What emerged was a conversation that was raw, honest, and deeply painful for both participants. Hubert finally had the opportunity to explain what had really happened during her departure from the show. She revealed the abusive marriage she had been hiding, the pregnancy that had complicated her work, and the contract offer that had felt deliberately designed to humiliate her. Most importantly, she made clear that she had never been fired. She had rejected an unacceptable offer and been replaced. Smith, now mature enough to understand the power dynamics he had wielded as a 21-year-old, acknowledged his role in creating the hostile environment that had made Hubert's life miserable. He admitted that his fear and insecurity had led him to view her professionalism as a threat to his survival. The reunion scene where Hubert met the rest of the cast for the first time in 27 years was emotionally overwhelming for everyone involved. The two Aunt Vivs, Hubert and Daphne Maxwell Reid, embraced each other, symbolically healing a wound that had divided the show's legacy for decades. But perhaps the most significant moment was the simplest: Smith and Hubert hugging each other and acknowledging the human cost of their prolonged warfare. After 27 years of public animosity, they were able to see each other not as enemies, but as people who had both been damaged by circumstances they were too young and inexperienced to handle properly. The reunion special became a cultural phenomenon, praised for its honesty about the costs of fame and the importance of forgiveness. But more importantly, it restored Janet Hubert's dignity and gave her the platform to tell her story in her own words. The healing that took place during the reunion extended beyond the cameras. Smith and Hubert began texting regularly, rebuilding a relationship that had been destroyed by miscommunication, power struggles, and industry politics. The little boy and the protective aunt that they had once played on television were finally able to exist in real life. The Fresh Prince reunion demonstrated something powerful about the possibility of redemption and reconciliation. It showed that even the deepest wounds could heal with enough time, maturity, and willingness to acknowledge past mistakes. For Janet Hubert, the reunion represented vindication after decades of character assassination. Her professionalism, her talent, and her worth were finally acknowledged by the person whose attacks had nearly destroyed her. For Will Smith, it represented the completion of a journey from an insecure young man, afraid of losing everything, to a mature artist capable of protecting and elevating those around him. The entertainment industry that had weaponized their conflict for decades was forced to confront the human cost of its power games. The Fresh Prince reunion became a masterclass in accountability, forgiveness, and the possibility of healing even the most destructive wounds. At 68, Janet Hubert had finally reclaimed her story. She was no longer the difficult actress who had been fired from a hit show. She was a talented professional who had been systematically destroyed for refusing to accept disrespect, and who had survived to tell the truth about what really happened. The little girl who had dreamed of Broadway stardom, the woman who had commanded television screens, and the survivor who had endured decades of character assassination were all finally, beautifully whole. Anyway, that's it for this video, folks. Bye.